before the election, the numbers in the Senate were what?
21-14.
21-14. Now, where do they look like they are?
23-12.
23-12. So another 2-seat difference.
Right, in the other direction. And it's 1 seat shy of a supermajority. And that's the kind of thing that I think people should be listening for in 2023 when the General Assembly comes back.
All right, so we're recording this the day after the carnage of the Colorado elections. We think we have most of the results in, but we might be off on a couple of things. If we are, forgive us. Marianne Goodland with Colorado Politics, both the Springs Gazette and Denver Gazette and so many other things. You've been on top of this. Let me just say it right out. Carnage, bloodbath. I didn't see this coming. Did you?
No, not at all. Particular in the Senate, in the state Senate, and I'll put my remarks first on the General Assembly. I thought the Republicans had a decent chance of picking up a couple of seats, particularly in Senate District 8, which is the northwestern and central north central mountains. I thought that was a possible for them. I thought, maybe Senate District 3 because I was watching the spending quite a bit. And the spending was seemed like it was tapering off by the...
Why don't we put some context here first?
Okay.
All right, so we know the big races,
Right.
the marquee races we know about. And Heidi lost with big numbers. O'Day lost in something that was much larger than I expected. All the state seats went to the Democrats. As of our taping, what we thought would be 2 pretty safe Republican U.S. congressional seats, both Boebert and the 8th going to Kirkmeyer, are going the other direction. This is mind-boggling that out of our 10-person delegation, there'll be 2 Republicans. The idea that Colorado is somehow still purplish or has a red streak to it, no, I don't see it at all. It's just that all of that was absolutely mind-boggling. But what really got me was what you're talking about in the state legislature, where I operate mostly, where it really affects Coloradans day in and day
Absolutely.
out. So before yesterday, the conventional wisdom was, Republicans have a shot, an outside shot, to take back the Senate,
Right.
to stop the carnage at the legislature, to stop all the progressive bills that are being signed. They can't change a whole lot, but they can stop the bleeding. All they need to do is get to that magic number of 18, and they were down by how many votes?
They were down 4, and what didn't help, what made this job just a little bit tougher was when Kevin Priola switched from Republican to Democrat in August. That really put the wind behind the sails, I think, for the Democrats, because you had a 21-14 Democratic advantage in the Senate, which meant that out of the 7 competitive seats that were up for election last night, out of the 17 total, the Republicans were going to have to win at least 4 of the 7.
4 out of 7 competitive.
4 out of the 7 competitive, but really it's actually 6 out of the 7 competitive because they had to hold on to the 2 Republican seats that were also competitive.
Right. So now going
they darn
into
near
this,
had to sweep the table.
But going into this, I thought, it's going to be tough for Heidi to win this. It's going to be tough for O'Day to win this. I wouldn't be surprised if Republicans won the treasurer's office or if Pam Anderson won Secretary of State. That's certainly in the realm of possibility. But I felt pretty comfortable Republicans would at least make gains in the state Senate. It's like, no, I don't see them getting to 18. I really don't see them getting to 18. But I see them making forward progress. Why this would be important is that, and we'll talk about the House in a second, is that in committees, particularly in the House, if you have a 2-person majority in a committee, you've got to convince 2 Democrats to stop a bill. If it's only 1 person, you have to convince, you have a shot that maybe you can get that a swing Democrat to vote with the Republicans.
And
It's
we saw examples of that in the 2022 session, and I'll give you a really good one. It was a bill that Jerry Sonnenberg ran on hospital visitation. That bill was destined to go down in flames. Every time somebody tried to run one of the, and this was tied to COVID, but every time somebody tried to run a bill like that, it went down in flames in the House. In the Senate, it goes to State Affairs, which Jerry sat on. The chair of State Affairs was Julie Gonzalez. And all he needed was one Democrat to vote with him to get that bill out of committee. Julie Gonzalez, who had lost multiple family members to COVID, wound up being the champion and getting that bill out of committee. It made it to the governor's desk and he signed it.
And by the way, the State Affairs Committee is known as the Kill Committee. And that's the committee that the Senate president sends it to so it dies. And it didn't die.
It didn't die.
Because it was close enough. So,
I think that was a kind of a big surprise when she gave it wings and off it went.
So here I am watching on election night, and I'm expecting the needle to at least go up a seat or two. Instead, so again, before the election, the numbers in the Senate were what?
21-14.
21-14. Now, where do they look like they are?
23-12.
23-12. So another 2-seat difference.
Right, in the other direction. And it's 1 seat shy of a supermajority. And that's the kind of thing that I think people should be listening for in 2023 when the General Assembly comes back.
Why is a supermajority important?
A couple of different things. Number one, if progressives are having problems with the governor over certain issues, he has kind of reined them in on some things, collective bargaining in the 2022 session, fracking bans, that kind of thing. And he would say, no, that's too far. I don't want to go that route. With a supermajority, if the governor threatens a veto, they'll just say, go for it, and we'll overturn your veto. So there's veto power. But the other one, and the one that I think people really need to key in on, is the idea of what the General Assembly can send to the ballot, and that's constitutional amendments. And we're already...
As it stands right now, there were several statutory changes on the ballot that were referred. Those were the ones with letters, like FF and GG. Mm-hmm. And when I put something on the ballot, like Prop 121, which was the tax reduction, I got to get a whole bunch of signatures, and it costs a lot of money. But the legislature, as long as they just get a simple majority in both houses, it's on the ballot.
And that's for statutory
And the governor
measures.
doesn't have to sign it or veto it. It's just, so all they have to go is, and when you have a democratically controlled legislature, that's easy. Just go, well, we'll let the people decide. And poof, it's on the ballot.
Right.
Where citizens have to fight really hard to get it on the
Correct.
ballot. You're telling me that if there's a supermajority, they can put on a constitutional amendment onto the ballot.
And we had several constitutional amendments on the ballot last night. Those were bipartisan measures. They weren't difficult for people,
And
they
passed.
And they passed. They all passed with that 55%. Actually, most of them passed with like 60, 70%. But I'm talking about the controversial things that would never get past either a legislature that had the Senate controlled by Republicans and the House controlled by Democrats, or that the Democrats needed a couple more votes to get that measure out the door. The Senate is 1 vote short of a supermajority. Now, what could they be looking at? I'm already hearing a couple of different things. Number one, a constitutional amendment that would, in effect, put the Reproductive Health Equity Act, this is the bill that they passed during the session to affirm the right to abortion. They were talking about that before the session was even over with, about putting that on the ballot. These things are expensive.
In other words, to take it out of statute.
No, they wouldn't take it out of statute. They just put it into the Constitution.
Right. Oh, and then just constitutionalize it.
Yeah.
To protect it.
Exactly. That's one. The other one, and the one that'll make your head spin, is a repeal of Tabor.
Of course, the thing that they hate the most, which is consent for raising taxes and growth of government. So why this is an issue is they could do this any time, but with the changes recently and a few years back, if I want to put something on the ballot, I have to get these signatures. If I want to put a constitutional change on the ballot, I have to get signatures in each of the 35 different Senate districts, which is ridiculously expensive. Before that change, and I forget when it was done, less than a decade ago, I could just get signatures anywhere. And it meant that working activists like me, not rich guys, could get something on a constitutional change. Now only very wealthy interests can get things on the ballot for a constitutional change or through the legislature if you have a supermajority.
The only thing that stops a constitutional amendment from getting out of the General Assembly right now is one vote in the state Senate. The House already has that supermajority. There are 2 votes above it.
All right, let's talk about the House for a second. Before the election, what were the numbers?
41-24.
41-24. That is just a ridiculous amount. I mean, ridiculous.
It's not quite a record, but it's close.
All right, and today?
We are at 46-19, and that is a record.
That is a record. We've never had such a lopsided...
We have never had Democrats with that many seats in the General Assembly, ever.
Have we ever had one party that's had that much?
I think there were probably times way in the days of yore where you had, and when the Democratic Party wasn't what it is now, you may have had supermajority. In fact, I'm fairly certain there were supermajorities by Republicans, but that's
so we already have...
Certainly before my time, I can tell you that.
So we already have a supermajority in the House.
Yep.
So if the governor vetoes something that progressives really want or Democrats really want, the House can already override it.
Yep.
And the Senate is only a vote?
One vote away.
One vote away. So...
And let's talk about where this is going. Even though they're one vote away now, think about where things are going to be in 2 years. You have at least 4 seats in the Senate that are going to be big targets to build that supermajority. It's Bob Rankin's seat, Republican. You've got a seat down in southern Jefferson County that's on the list. Cleve Simpson's seat down in southwestern Colorado. That seat swung quite a bit left in redistricting. So there is a path forward for Democrats to get to that supermajority in 2 years.
Even if they don't just get one Republican to switch over on an issue. And I hate to tell you this, from my experience, Republicans aren't always Republican.
Well, look at Kevin Priola. There's your perfect example. Or other Republicans who I've termed in the last couple of years as the Mod Squad.
You remember back in the day, Micklejohn. You know, there was always a Democrat labeled as a Republican. Now, Republicans
and vice versa.
You always want that person because you need that vote to get into leadership, and that's the key. All right, so I'm watching this go down, and I'm thinking there is one real loser in all this, and his name is Jared Polis.
I think Jared Polis is going to have a heck of a fight over the next 2 to 4 years here, herding the cats, especially in the House.
Because what I saw in the last 4 years was that the progressives in the legislature, wackadoos in the legislature, were pushing him around, and he signed on to ridiculous bills that I've known Jared for 2 decades. That my sense tells me he knows these are bad ideas, but he wasn't going to spend the political capital to stop them. He knows better, but he's doing his own political calculations. He wasn't going to spend it. He wasn't going to fight it. In the same way, when John Hickenlooper finally lost, I think it was the House, to Republicans, I think he was like, oh, thank God. I don't have to make these tough decisions of vetoing this stuff or telling them my friends don't send it to me. Polis now is going to be inundated. The ridiculous stuff that came to his desk, and he signed almost all of it. Now it's going to come like a fire hydrant. It's going to be ridiculous. And this image, and it is only imagery, of him being a business friendly, libertarian-ish governor, which he ain't, that's going to get ripped off real fast because I think they're just going to, he is a mouse and they are a cat that's going to be toying with him.
I think the next 2 years are going to be really weird.
How do you mean really weird? Put some meat onto that.
Well, Republicans have been eviscerated by what happened last night in the legislature. Their only path forward is to do what they've been doing, but unfortunately in a much lesser way because their numbers are just that much less, is to try and negotiate with Democrats to make what they view as bad bills better. You saw that with the collective bargaining bill. You saw that even with the fentanyl bill in the 2022 session. I think they're going to have a much, much harder time, not only because their numbers are so much less, but because of what the makeup of the Democrats in the legislature is going to be. This is going to be a far more progressive legislature than what we've seen in quite a long time.
I just stopped it for a second.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we had a radical socialist legislature for the last 2 years.
Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet.
And we ain't seen nothing yet. Oh, thank you. You made my elder years so much more enjoyable.
Happy to help.
All right, let's play the blame game just a little bit. Nobody saw this coming. I mean, we saw, again, the marquee players, I think a lot of people saw what was happening. But down here we said, no, redistricting only helps Republicans. We looked at Boebert's seat, for instance, and you said, no, this is even better for Lauren Boebert. This is fine. We looked at most of those Senate seats, most of those House seats, state House seats and state Senate seats. And we said, no, it couldn't get any worse than what we've had for the last decade. These are marginally better than what we had. I remember talking to Lundeen, and Lundeen said, this is so different than it was a couple of years ago because we have the funding to do what we didn't do 2 years ago. We have actual funding to fight in these seats.
And he did, and the Senate Majority Fund, which he runs, this is their soft money group, did the best job that I've ever seen of raising money for these Senate races. They put millions of dollars into these very, very competitive seats, and what they got out of it was just astonishing. And I want to bring in redistricting here for a moment. We've been looking at the liens that the Redistricting Commission attached to each one of these House and Senate seats, particularly the competitive ones.
When you say liens, what do you mean?
For example, you could look at Senate District 20, which I think had a 5% Democratic lien. Senate District 8, about the same. Senate District 24, which is up in Thornton, that one I think was like a 12% Democratic lien, meaning when the Redistricting Commission made these estimations, they looked at the election in all the elected offices in 2018, the statewide elected offices. They looked at the 2016 presidential race in Colorado, not the national. They looked at what happened in 2020, and they said, okay, here's all these different, and Democrats won all of this. So when we looked at the numbers that came out from the Redistricting Commission, the conventional wisdom from people that I talked to said, they way overestimated Democratic performance. This is not going to hold up in 2022. And I think that was part of the logic behind expecting that there was going to be more Republican wins on Tuesday night, is because there was such this overestimation by 5 percentage points, I think was the number I heard from a couple of folks, overestimated by 5%. So a seat that might be estimated at like 2.5% Democratic lean is actually a 2.5% Republican lean. That's a seat.
That's what they were thinking.
That's where the thinking
came
from. So
Republicans were thinking this is a very competitive seat. In fact it wasn't.
And it turned out not to be.
I have a similar theory about the polling, which was in 2016. Republicans keep their cards closer to the vest. They don't tell pollsters the truth or don't talk to them as often. And so we found out that pollsters underrepresented Republicans in their little formulas. Every pollster, it's like a chef. They all have their own little magic of how they, what they weigh in their numbers. And so this time they weren't going to make that mistake.
Right.
And so they put into their mixture more Republicans because they weren't going to make that mistake. And so all these seats looked a lot more competitive than they were. For instance, the Bennett-O'Day seat, O'Day was within the margin of error. He was down by 1.5 going into this last weekend.
Yeah, that was kind of an outlier poll, though.
But they were all outlier polls, as it turns out.
As it turns out, yeah. I guess that's.
All right.
True.
So bringing it back to the blame game, I want to ask the abortion question. For those of us who are junkies, we understand the abortion ruling was from the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. None of these elections have anything to do with it. Pam Anderson, I have no idea what her position on abortion is. It doesn't matter. The Secretary of State has no jurisdiction over abortion. It just doesn't. The Treasurer doesn't do anything on abortion, unless they move up into higher office. And Colorado has arguably the most lax abortion law in the country. There's just it's a non-issue in this state. But yet, it seems as though that was in the fog of all this and overweighed the crime and economics and inflation. So what was it that got people voting instead of R?
It was abortion.
Do you think that's what I'm asking.
Statistically, we know that was a factor.
Tell me how we know this.
Evan Wiloge, who has done data analysis for us, and
us being the Gazette and Colorado Politics. Right.
We did a piece here about a month ago looking at the impact of the Dobbs decision on voter registration. When the leak came out in May, you saw a spike, boom, big spike in Democratic women, unaffiliated women, even Republican women. Voter registrations just went boom, way up. And then when the final decision came out in June, another spike. That was driving people to register to vote. Now, our big question was, would it translate into actual people showing up at the ballot box and making decisions based on that? I think we may have seen some of that in what happened last night.
Polling showed that as the election got closer, even those suburban women were more concerned about economic issues than the abortion issues. And if you're a Colorado woman concerned with both, you should know that the law here in Colorado, it's not an issue. It is safe. It's safer than it's safe. Abortion's not going away anytime soon. But still, it's still played because the people who vote in these issues are not like us. They're not junkies. They don't follow the law saying, no, Colorado has the most liberal abortion law. It's legal up until the moment of birth, and that's, and that this legislature passed it to even make it more so. So I get that. But it's from your point of view, if you could boil down this Republican carnage to one issue, and I know it's a million, you think it's abortion?
I think that did have, I think it had a more significant role than I think most people are willing to acknowledge, just based on the data that we looked at. And if that was the driver for people to register to vote, it maybe wasn't quite the driver for election night because the issue seemed to die down a little bit. But the candidates didn't help themselves by continuing to bring it up over and over and over again. It was a reminder every single day that this is what is at risk. And
which candidates brought it up every time?
Kirkmeyer did it all the time. Caraveo did it all the time.
Well, but mind you, Caraveo should bring it up every time to point it out on her opponent.
Right. But this was a constant refrain in a lot of the advertising that was on TV, and every time you heard that word abortion, it was like, oh, Dobbs, we can't afford to have that.
Even though it was ridiculous, because
Obviously, the abortion laws aren't going to change in this state
Well,
anytime soon.
even the O'Day ones, when during the primary,
Right.
you're beating him up. The Democrats were beating him up because he was pro-abortion, and then those same Democratic dollars were beating him up in the general because
he was
anti-abortion.
anti-abortion.
Yeah. But that's the nature of politics.
But I think the messaging on abortion was effective. Even if you felt really secure about what the law in Colorado says about abortion, that's not going to change anytime soon. You now have people coming in from a lot of other states.
Let me throw one more thought out.
To get abortions here. This is a sanctuary state for abortion, and I think that's also in people's minds.
Let me throw one more thing out, which is basic fundamentals. I still believe that the left has the ground game down, the blocking and tackling, if you will. Fundamentals.
Absolutely.
The community organizing, the knocking on doors. I live in Boulder, city of Boulder. This is not a city that needs to worry about are their local politicians going to win their races for the legislature. My son, who has Down syndrome, since he has a state ID, automatically gets a ballot, which I find rather interesting. And I'm always there going, should I help him do this? No, I can't help him do this. He can't read. He has, no real opinion on this stuff. And sure enough, over the weekend, knock, 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 two lovely women from the Democratic Party are there to help him vote.
Oh, dear.
You're right. And it's like, wait a second. What possibly do you need him? You're going to win everything in Boulder. So I guess you can help with Polis. You can help with the ballot initiatives. You can help with the senator if you help him vote. But that's the hardcore, down and dirty, ugly, expensive ground game that the left has organized, paid for, and mans that I still don't see Republicans doing.
Not enough.
Do I have a point there?
You do have a point there. There are folks on the right, the people that Michael Fields works with, the Americans for Prosperity, they do a lot of ground game work, but it's from at least what I've seen, and I look at campaign finance reports.
And by the way, he's no longer with them.
No, yeah, I know. It's
right.
Advanced Colorado Institute. Yeah. No, I get that. But they do it in a very, very limited way. And I think Democrats have a much bigger universe that they can work with on these things, particularly, and so I think that is part of it. That you've got people who are on the right who are really good at this, but there's not enough of them, and there isn't. And when you look at how much gets spent, and I love campaign finance, I watch it obsessively. There's considerably more money being spent on these efforts on the left than there is on the right. That's just.
Add some meat to that. What do you mean considerably more?
When you look at,
give me a ratio.
Over the last couple of years, and maybe this year, because of the Senate Majority Fund doing such a great job of raising money this year, you see a lot of non-monetary contributions, and you know about this because this is what you guys do too. That is used for canvassing, door knocking, getting out there, and there is a cost involved with that. It's called a non-monetary contribution, but I've seen I've seen some growth in those non-monetary contributions in this election cycle that was kind of a surprise, frankly. A lot of money being spent on the ground game, more than I've seen in the past. I can't tell you the exact dollar amounts because it's spread out over multiple independent expenditure committees and issue committees and all that. But I think there was more money, and I'll look at this, but I think there was more money spent on the ground game this year than we've seen in the past.
On both sides?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But still, as a ratio,
2 to 1.
2 to 1.
Easily.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more than that.
It's probably more than that, but I'm very comfortable at 2 to 1.
Yeah, I put it 4 to 1, but we can argue about that later. All right, let's dispel this one. So help me with this one. You've been following this for a long time. I guarantee you, when the dust settles, there will be still some of the same old folks who are going to go, you know why we lost? Because we didn't have a true conservative at the top of these tickets. If only we had Ron Hanks, if only we had Greg Lopez, if only we had Tina Peters there, that would have been the clear choice that we would have needed to give voters in Colorado what they needed to see this. And that would have rippled down throughout the ballot.
I don't agree. I think if
No, you're wrong.
I think if that had been at the top of the ticket, you would wind up, you could potentially wind up with a supermajority in the Senate, and you certainly would have seen, instead of 17 points, which is I think where the Polis Canal race is right now, 25 points.
Why would you see that? Why?
Because it's all about unaffiliated voters. And I think a lot of them could look at Ganal and certainly at Joe O'Dea and some of the other folks at the top of the ticket. They did, so unaffiliated voters did go ahead and vote for Republicans this year. Look at what happened in the primary. That was decided by unaffiliated voters.
Without a doubt.
That was decided by unaffiliated voters who wound up at the top of the GOP ticket. If you put the Ron Hanks and the Greg Lopez's and the Tina Peters in there, you're going to scare away more unaffiliated voters than you're going to gain. And in my opinion, just because of what happened in June with the primary, it was unaffiliated voters who decided who was on the ticket this year.
How long have you lived in Colorado?
40 years.
Okay. You're a newbie.
Thanks a lot.
And we're tired of you people moving into our state and ruining it. So for those of us who've been around...
I've made this state a lot better.
No, you haven't, woman. Oh, you haven't. Go back to wherever the hell you came from. So for those of us, I've been here since 6 years old, all right? And so to see...
Oh, so you're a carpetbagger too.
No, my parents were the cheap carpetbaggers, let me tell you. So I've been here, my God, 52 years. Oh my God. Anyway.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to depress you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, so little time. Anyway, to see how the state has changed from my point of view as a place where people really came to unleash their talents, to take risk. There was a lot of freedom here. There was a lot of space. And to see it turn, I'll use my terminology, to turn into much more of a command and control, California-esque style of government. It has completely changed. The change has really happened, I believe, because of demographic shifts. The Denver Post a couple years ago put together just a wonderful analysis, and it showed that most of the influx into Colorado over the years has come from, number one,
California.
Number two,
Texas.
New York.
New York.
Number three, Illinois. So you have these, failed big government states. People are leaving, I think, and they're acclimated to big government. What I found even more interesting was the outflow. People like me who've had enough of this, who wanted their freedom back, and they go to Wyoming first, then Texas. And then Florida. And so you're fighting a demographic change. And for those of us who have been here a lot longer than you folks, it feels like the Chinese overrunning the Korean border. It's just like, how do you fight this? And we forget the character has just changed. And for those of us who love the state for its freedom, for its limited government, for the ability to go take risk, we wonder if it can ever go back to the way it was. And I know I'm oversimplifying this. My old man came out here, he was born in the Bronx, raised, and he wanted someplace to raise his kids where he could, direct his own life. I get a feeling people come here now because it's beautiful, the skiing is good, and I can do my job on a computer anywhere. And it just seems different. I wonder how much of this is a demographic change that we just can't fight.
I don't I don't think you can fight it. And I blame political polarization, and it's both sides, and you know it's both sides. People are being drawn to where they think their political interests are served. The Californias, the New Yorks, the Illinois coming here, the folks who are going to Texas and Florida. And I'm hearing more and more of that from somebody saying, I've had it with this state, I'm going to go move to Texas, I'm going to go someplace else. The political polarization that we have seen over the last, probably almost 20 years now, I think, is driving a lot of this, and I don't know that you can reverse it.
And it breaks my heart, because for those of us who grew up here, it doesn't feel like home anymore, and it feels very unwelcoming. So, do you have any concerns about one-party control up to this level of supermajority? I've never seen anything like this. I
haven't either, and personally, I'm not a fan of one-party control, and I'll just put that out there.
This is why we need a monarch.
Right. But I don't know that we're going to see anything different from that, at least over the next 4 years.
Why 4? You don't think we're going to find some big solution in 2 years?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Well, obviously, Polis isn't going to go anywhere for the next 4 years.
You don't think he's going to run for president?
No.
Why not?
Because I think Biden will talk him out of it. Biden is getting moving more and more toward making that announcement. I think I could see Polis running for president maybe in 2028. I don't see him running in 24. Do I think he's interested? Absolutely. I'm just not sure that he's going to be able to do that. If Biden chooses to go forward in 2024, I think Polis sits it out.
If something happens to Biden?
All bets are off.
Fair enough.
All bets are off. I don't see Republicans gaining a lot of ground in the House, in the State House, in 2 years. Could they? Sure. But this was such a Tuesday night was just a really, really bad night for the Republican Party, and the Republican Party needs to do a lot. I think needs to do a lot of self-reflection on why voters aren't drawn to what the Republican Party is selling right now. Election deniers, probably, we had a few of them that were running at the state level in this election cycle. Most of them wound up getting sent home. Doesn't stop the fact that we still have a strong cadre of election deniers and people of that persuasion within the Republican Party. They're still there, and as long as they're allowed to run things in a couple of places, I think that's going to keep people from taking Republicans seriously. You've got to go after those unaffiliated voters. That's where the future is. And right now, they're running about 60-40 in favor of the Democrats. How do you switch that? You got to find something that appeals to them, and the Republicans have not found that place yet.
This has been delightful.
Sure.
Fun. Uplifting. So you want to go have these in a membership of the Hemlock Society with me, perhaps?
Oh, sure.
Marianne, it's always great talking with you. It's going to be an interesting session coming up. So we'll be reading everything you do in the Gazette and, of course, Colorado Politics. Thanks for joining me.
Very happy to join you. Thank you for asking.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.